All public schools and their contractors must meet accessibility guidelines for all web content, including web pages, documents, images, videos, and social media. I'm Kat Zimmerman. Let's review some changes you can make in today's patent pop-up practice on making content accessible. Part 1, Color. Pop-up practices, where practice makes progress. Season 3. Under the Americans with Disabilities Act, all web content and mobile apps provided by state and local governments must comply with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG, version 2.1, level AA. A link to the guidelines is in the description below. State and local governments includes public schools, community colleges, and public universities. Importantly, the rule also requires schools to ensure any provider they contract with also meets the technical standards. As of the 2024-2025 school year, the WCAG has 3 published versions, 2.0, 2.1, and 2.2. The Department of Justice ruling made in April of 2024 requires schools to meet version 2.1. However, the versions are backwards compatible, so you may choose to reference version 2.2 instead. Within the WCAG, there are 3 levels of compliance: A, AA, and AAA. Success criteria marked as level A are essential. If the criteria for level A are not met, then the content's not accessible, even with special accessibility equipment or software. Level AA compliance is typically the goalpost for most businesses and is the requirement for public schools and their contractors. Level AAA is the highest criteria and considered to be ideal. However, not all content is able to conform at this high level. If your district serves an area with a population of 50,000 or more, everything must be ready by April 24, 2026. For smaller populations, you have until April 26, 2027. The guidelines apply to all web content, including content that's already been posted, with few exceptions. So keep in mind that new content should follow these guidelines, but old content still in use will need to be updated as well. Plan your timeline accordingly. In this series, we will walk through guidelines that need to be met by classroom teachers and staff and how to meet them. Before we begin, pause the video and take a few minutes to list out the types of web content that you use. For example, slide decks, word processor documents, spreadsheets, PDFs, videos, web pages, forms, and images. Pay special thought to any scanned documents you use, which are likely inaccessible and will need to be recreated in a digital space. In part 1, we're focusing on color. Think about how you use color in a typical document, video, or presentation. Do you use the same colors across all files? Do you color code to convey meaning? Let's start with color contrast. Most people can recognize that black text on a white background is easy to read, while yellow text on a white background is difficult to read, as shown here with my 2 white text boxes, both which say, "Sphinx of Black Quartz, judge my vow." The question is, at what point is the contrast deemed sufficient for accessibility? According to WCAG Success Criteria 1.4.3, the answer is in the contrast ratio. Let's use the WebAIM free contrast checker to check the contrast ratio of these 2 text boxes, both using white text which describes their color codes, with one having a green chalkboard background and the other with a Dodger blue background. A link to the contrast checker is in the description below. There are 2 values we need to input: the foreground, in this case the text color, and the background. My foreground in both of these cases is white, so I'll use the lightness slider to slide all the way to the right. If I was using black text, I would slide it all the way to the left. For the background, I could put in the hex value, which we'll talk about in a minute, but instead I'll use the eyedropper by first selecting the color picker box and then choosing the eyedropper icon in the pop-up. I could also use the red, green, blue RGB values or the color picker screen to play around with the color manually. Now I've selected my eyedropper, so I'll go over into my presentation and hover over the color that I want to check for my background. My green chalkboard background has a couple different shades of green, so I'll choose the lightest one. This gives me a contrast ratio of 5.2 to 1. Below the ratio box, we can see that this passes the level AA requirement of at least 4.5 to 1 for regular text and at least 3 to 1 for large text. It also passes the requirement for graphics. For my second text box, I'll use the hex code instead. In my Canva presentation, I'll open the Shapes color panel and select the color to open the color picker that has the hex code. What is a hex code? A hex code is a series of 6 numbers and letters that uniquely identify a color. Hex codes can be found in every application where color is adjustable when you open a color picker. Hex codes are universal across applications, so my code in Canva is the same as my code in Google Docs, is the same as my code in Schoology. In our first example with the white text on the green chalkboard background, the white text was FFF, FFF, and the green chalkboard was 376C4E. For our second example, the white text on the Dodger blue background, the foreground, our text, is still white, or FFFFFF, so I don't need to adjust it. Now I'll copy my hex code for Dodger blue, 32AAF3, from Canva and paste it into the contrast checker. This gives a ratio of 2.56 to 1, which the checker tells me does not meet success criteria 1.4.3. Since it doesn't meet the guideline, I will use the lightness slider in the contrast checker to find a darker color that does meet the requirement but is in the same color family. Now I'll grab the hex code from my color checker and go put it back into Canva. Importantly, now that I found out I need to change this color in all of my documents, I will write down my new hex code and save it for later so that I don't have to go through this process again. As you work on meeting the color contrast guideline, a few notes. First, large text is defined as 14 point and bold, or at least 18 point and not bold. For comparison, most of the text in this video is 35 point and medium bold. This information is available in the explanation section below the contrast checker in WebAIM's tool, shown here with a red box around the definition. Second, there are no requirements for purely decorative icons, which convey no information and are marked as decorative in the alternate text. For example, this accessibility icon. There is also no requirement for text that is part of a logo or a brand name. For example, the patent logo shown here on a white background. If you're having trouble meeting the guideline, here's a pro tip. White text with a black border or on a black background can be read on any color or background image, like this rainbow gradient or busy city street video, where the text, Sphinx of Black Quartz, Judge My Vow, is shown. While we're talking about color, be sure to use multiple characteristics to convey meaning while still being sure to meet the guideline for color contrast. Examples of characteristics include color, text weight, underlining, and icons. This addresses success criteria 1.3.3 and 1.4.1. For example, this slide about static electricity, which includes the definition of ions in red, relies on the single characteristic of color. Instead, try this second example of the same slide where the definition is underlined in red with a star emoji. Tip: use the keyboard shortcut Windows period on Windows devices and Command-Control-Space on Apple devices to access the emoji keyboard. Use emojis sparingly and in addition to other characteristics to help convey meaning, but avoid using emojis for decoration or in excess as they don't always play nice with screen readers. If you already color code your notes, try adding distinct icons or emojis and/or text adjustments to go with each color. This will especially benefit people with red-green color blindness, the most common form of color blindness. For example, red underlined text with a star for definitions and things that will be on the test, blue with a check mark for side notes and interesting tidbits, and green with a green square for examples and non-examples. Remember to check your contrast on your colors and add alt text for image icons before you copy-paste them wherever they're needed. Check out the links in the description below to review the full set of WCAG 2.1 AA success criteria. Be sure to share this with your tech team so they can review the school's choices of tech tools and ensure all success criteria are met. Thanks for joining me on today's patent pop-up practice, where practice makes progress, produced by Kat Zimmerman. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more.